Welcome to the world of daily life stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy listening. The Terminal of Truth. The private jet terminal was a sanctuary of quiet opulence. Polished marble floors stretched out in pristine symmetry, reflecting pendant lights that hung like glowing stars. The hum of jet engines in the distance was a muted symphony, a reminder of the world beyond these walls. Executives in bespoke suits and socialites clutching designer handbags glided through the space as though they owned the air itself. Their conversations, hushed but purposeful, created a background melody of ambition and indulgence. Amid this orchestrated elegance, Sophia Langston entered with a stride that was both deliberate and commanding. Her navy blazer, tailored to perfection, caught the light with understated sophistication. Her wide-legged trousers swayed gently as she moved, exuding an air of casual authority. She wore no jewelry save for a small, understated wristwatch. The only accessory she carried was a sleek leather tote, balanced by a tablet tucked securely under her arm. Sophia wasn't just a woman who had arrived, she was the arrival itself. She had built her luxury goods empire from the ground up, a journey marked by countless sleepless nights, a ruthless focus on quality, and an unrelenting drive to succeed. Today's flight was a pivotal one. The boardroom waiting for her in Geneva held the keys to a multimillion-dollar expansion, a deal that would solidify her company's footprint across Europe. Yet, she carried no signs of anxiety, only quiet determination. Approaching the check-in desk, she was met by a young woman whose polished uniform was accented by a welcoming smile. "Good morning, ma'am. How may I assist you?" the attendant asked, her voice a blend of professionalism and warmth. Sophia returned the smile, her tone measured but friendly. "Good morning. I'm here for the Langston flight to Geneva." The attendant's eyes flicked to her monitor, her fingers typing quickly. Recognition dawned on her face, and she straightened her posture. "Of course, Miss Langston. Everything is in order. Your jet is being prepared as we speak, and the captain will meet you shortly." Sophia nodded appreciatively and stepped aside, her gaze sweeping the terminal. She wasn't one to dwell on the aesthetics of her surroundings, but there was something about this space, its quiet assurance of luxury, that resonated with her own ethos. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to savor it. This was a milestone, a reflection of how far she'd come from the days when even a simple plane ticket seemed like an indulgence. Her reverie was interrupted by the sound of footsteps, deliberate, authoritative, and growing louder. From across the terminal, a man in a crisp pilot's uniform approached. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a square jaw. His stride was confident, and his uniform was immaculate, but there was something in his expression that didn't sit quite right. His eyes, though sharp, seemed to carry an unspoken question, as if he were assessing her in a way that went beyond professional protocol. "Good morning," he said, stopping a few feet from her. "I'm Captain Todd Benson. I'll be flying you to Geneva today." Sophia offered a polite nod. "Good morning, Captain Benson. I appreciate you ensuring everything is ready for the flight." But Benson didn't immediately respond. His gaze flicked briefly to her carry-on, then back to her face, a shadow of skepticism crossing his features. "I see," he said slowly. "Are you sure you're on the right flight? The Langston jet is a private charter." Sophia's brows lifted slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her face before she masked it with composure. "Yes, I'm quite sure," she replied evenly. "This is my jet." The captain's demeanor shifted almost imperceptibly. His professional facade cracked just enough to reveal the condescension beneath. "I'll need to verify that," he said, his tone polite on the surface, but laced with disbelief. "Please wait here." Sophia watched as he turned and strode back to the check-in desk, where the attendant appeared taken aback by his approach. Sophia couldn't hear their conversation, but the captain's gestures, pointing at the monitor, glancing back at her, made his doubts clear. The attendant, to her credit, seemed adamant, shaking her head and offering a firm response. When Benson returned, his expression was tight. It appears everything checks out, he said, though his tone suggested he was still grappling with the reality of the situation. We'll be ready to board shortly. Sophia's smile was polite but steely. Good. Let me know when we're ready. As the captain walked away, she felt a flicker of irritation rise within her. This wasn't the first time she'd encountered skepticism about her success. Being a black woman in a world dominated by assumptions meant she often had to prove herself twice over. But she had long since learned to let these moments fuel her resolve rather than diminish it. Still, this was her jet, her company, and her hard-earned success. And if Captain Benson couldn't see that yet, he would learn soon enough. Unveiling assumptions. The morning sun had cast a warm, golden glow across the tarmac when Sophia Langston stepped through the sliding doors of the private jet terminal. She walked with the kind of confidence that wasn't taught but earned, built through years of persistence, ingenuity, and grit. Her heels clicked softly on the polished marble floors as she passed travelers whose glances lingered just a fraction longer than necessary. Some seemed to recognize her face, though they couldn't immediately place it. Others simply noticed the undeniable aura of importance that followed her like a shadow. Behind the check-in counter, the attendant, who had greeted Sophia with nothing but professionalism, watched her retreating figure, her posture subtly straighter after the interaction. The name Langston carried weight, particularly in circles where power, influence, and wealth intersected. Sophia Langston had revolutionized the luxury goods industry, blending sustainability with high-end fashion in a way no one else had successfully done. Her company, Langston Luxe, had become synonymous with elegance, innovation, and ethical business practices. Today, Sophia was flying to Geneva to finalize a deal that would position her company as a global leader. However, not everyone recognized the significance of her presence. Captain Todd Benson, stationed near the tarmac, watched as Sophia's jet was readied for departure. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and meticulously groomed, the very picture of a seasoned pilot. But his thoughts betrayed him as he observed her through the terminal's glass windows. His years in aviation had introduced him to many passengers, from self-made entrepreneurs to celebrities who inherited their wealth. Yet, Sophia didn't fit the mold he had unconsciously constructed. Her demeanor was polished but not ostentatious, her attire was refined but not excessively branded. To Todd, she seemed out of place. When Sophia approached the jet, Benson stepped forward to greet her. The faintest furrow appeared between his brows, but he smoothed it quickly, offering a professional smile. Good morning. I'm Captain Benson. I'll be piloting your flight to Geneva today. Good morning, Captain, Sophia replied, her tone even and pleasant. I trust everything is on schedule. Benson hesitated, glancing briefly at her carry-on luggage, before meeting her gaze. It is, though I'll need to confirm a few details. Could you clarify if you're traveling on behalf of someone? Sophia's brows rose imperceptibly. The question wasn't inherently offensive, but the tone, subtly questioning her authority, was impossible to ignore. No, Captain, she replied with quiet firmness. This is my flight. I am the owner of the jet. For a moment, Benson's professional mask slipped. Surprise flickered in his eyes, followed by an expression Sophia recognized all too well, doubt. He quickly recovered, nodding curtly. Of course, Miss Langston. My apologies for the misunderstanding. Sophia didn't respond immediately. Instead, she studied him for a beat longer than was comfortable, her gaze cool and assessing. Then, with a small, composed smile, she said, No misunderstanding, Captain. Let's ensure everything is ready for takeoff. Benson nodded again and excused himself, disappearing into the jet to perform final checks. Sophia, meanwhile, ascended the steps and entered the cabin. The interior was as sleek and modern as she had specified during its customization, supple leather seats in muted tones, polished wood accents, and soft lighting that created an atmosphere of understated luxury. She sank into one of the seats and pulled out her tablet, intent on reviewing the details of the upcoming meeting. But her focus faltered as her mind lingered on the interaction with Benson. Assumptions take flight. Captain Benson's reaction wasn't new to Sophia. It was the same skepticism she'd faced countless times before. People who judged her success as improbable, who saw her skin tone and gender as anomalies in spaces like this. She had learned to navigate those moments with grace, but that didn't mean they left her unaffected. In the cockpit, Benson was adjusting the flight controls with his co-pilot, a younger man named Jared. Jared, eager to prove himself on this high-profile flight, noticed Benson's quiet demeanor. "Everything all right, Captain?" Jared asked. Benson hesitated, then shrugged. "It's fine. Just an unusual start to the day." Jared raised an eyebrow. "Unusual how?" Benson glanced toward the cabin door, then back at the control panel. "It's nothing. Just, our passenger. I wasn't expecting someone like her." Jared frowned. "Someone like her?" Benson sighed, his tone cautious. "She's not the typical type you'd see owning a jet like this. It caught me off guard, that's all." Jared didn't respond immediately, but his expression grew thoughtful. After a moment, he said, "Well, whoever she is, she clearly belongs here. Otherwise, we wouldn't be flying her, would we?" Benson gave a noncommittal grunt, but his thoughts churned. It wasn't outright hostility that he felt. He prided himself on being professional, but rather an ingrained bias, a disbelief that Sophia Langston could have achieved so much. The weight of words. Meanwhile, back in the cabin, Sophia's flight attendant, Marie, entered with a tray of fresh fruit and sparkling water. "Miss Langston, would you like anything else before we depart?" she asked, her tone warm and deferential. Sophia glanced up from her tablet and smiled. "No, thank you, Marie. This is perfect." Marie hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "If you don't mind me saying, Miss Langston, I admire what you've built. It's inspiring to see someone succeed on their own terms." Sophia's smile softened. "Thank you, Marie. That means a great deal to me." The conversation was brief, but it served as a reminder of why Sophia pushed forward, despite the doubts and assumptions she encountered. She wasn't just paving a path for herself, she was challenging the narratives that said people like her didn't belong in these spaces. As the engines roared to life and the jet began its taxi to the runway, Sophia settled into her seat. She glanced toward the cockpit, her resolve solidifying. If Captain Benson thought she didn't belong here, it was up to her to remind him, not with anger, but with the quiet power of her presence. As the jet lifted off, climbing steadily into the sky, Sophia closed her eyes for a moment. The flight ahead would be smooth on paper, but she knew turbulence often came in forms that weren't written on the weather reports. The storm at 30,000 feet. The jet had climbed steadily into the stratosphere, the hum of its powerful engines a constant reminder of its precision and capability. Sophia sat in one of the plush leather seats, her tablet propped on the walnut-finished table before her. Charts, projections, and notes for her Geneva meeting filled the screen. She tried to immerse herself in the work, but her mind kept drifting back to the captain's earlier behavior. Captain Todd Benson had maintained an air of cold professionalism since takeoff. He had gone through the standard safety announcements without so much as a glance in her direction, leaving the flight attendant, Marie, to handle any passenger interaction. Sophia had caught snippets of his voice over the intercom, cool, measured, and devoid of the warmth she had come to expect from her crew. This wasn't her first flight on her private jet, but it was the first time she felt like an unwelcome guest on her own property. Marie approached with a tray holding a perfectly arranged cup of herbal tea and a small plate of macarons. "Miss Langston," she said with a genuine smile, "I thought you might enjoy a refreshment." Sophia smiled back, grateful for the warmth. "Thank you, Marie. That's very thoughtful of you." As Marie placed the tray down, she hesitated, glancing toward the cockpit door. "I hope everything is to your satisfaction. If there's anything you need, please let me know." Sophia caught the subtle tension in her tone. "Is there something wrong, Marie?" Marie hesitated, then lowered her voice. "It's just Captain Benson. He seems a bit preoccupied today." Sophia gave a knowing nod. I noticed. Don't worry, Marie. I'll handle it if it becomes an issue. Marie offered a relieved smile and stepped away, leaving Sophia to sip her tea and ponder her next move. She wasn't one to let such behavior slide, but she also knew that timing was everything. For now, she would let Benson's professionalism, or lack thereof, speak for itself. The jet continued its journey, cruising smoothly above the clouds. Sophia returned to her work, her sharp mind quickly dissecting the complexities of the deal ahead. Time passed swiftly, and she barely noticed when the seatbelt sign flicked on with a faint chime. This is your captain speaking, Benson's voice came over the intercom, clipped and efficient. We've encountered some unexpected turbulence ahead. Please fasten your seatbelts and remain seated until further notice. Sophia buckled herself in and glanced out the window. The serene blue sky was giving way to darker clouds, their edges tinged with silver. The jet began to shudder gently, then more aggressively as it plunged into the turbulence. From her seat, Sophia could feel the tension in the air, not just from the plane, but from the people aboard. Marie moved quickly to secure loose items, her composure a testament to her training. Sophia, however, couldn't help but notice that Captain Benson's voice lacked the usual reassurance pilots provided during such situations. Instead, his updates were terse, almost begrudging. The turbulence worsened, and Sophia gripped the armrests of her seat. She had experienced rough flights before, but this felt different, not just because of the conditions, but because of the undercurrent of unease Benson had sown. Finally, the jet steadied, breaking through the storm and into calmer skies. The tension in Sophia's body eased, but her resolve hardened. She had tolerated Benson's condescension long enough. It was time to confront the issue head-on. She pressed the button to summon Marie, who arrived promptly. Marie, could you ask Captain Benson to step out for a moment? I'd like a word. Marie hesitated but nodded. Of course, Miss Langston. Moments later, Benson emerged from the cockpit, his expression guarded. Miss Langston, he said, his tone cool. Is there something I can assist you with? Sophia met his gaze steadily, her voice calm but firm. Yes, Captain Benson. I've noticed a pattern in your behavior today that I find troubling. I'd like to address it. Benson's brows knit together, and he crossed his arms. I'm not sure I understand, ma'am. My focus has been entirely on ensuring this flight is safe and efficient. Sophia leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. Ensuring a safe flight is the bare minimum of your responsibilities. What I'm addressing is your attitude. From the moment I arrived at the terminal, you've made it clear that you doubt I belong here. Whether it was questioning my presence on my own jet or the lack of basic courtesy during this flight, your behavior has been unacceptable. Benson's posture stiffened. I'm sorry if you've interpreted anything I've done as disrespectful, but my job is to fly this aircraft, not cater to perceptions. Sophia's expression didn't waver. Respect isn't about catering, Captain. It's about professionalism. If you had doubts about my authority or ownership, those should have been addressed discreetly and resolved. Instead, you chose to let your assumptions cloud your conduct. That's not only unprofessional, it's deeply disappointing. For a moment, silence hung in the cabin. Benson's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Sophia continued, her voice firm but even. I've worked hard to build what I have, Captain. I've faced countless obstacles, and I've overcome them all. But I will not tolerate being disrespected in my own space. I suggest you reflect on that before this flight is over. Benson's lips pressed into a thin line, and he gave a curt nod. Understood, Miss Langston. I'll return to the cockpit. As he turned and walked away, Sophia felt a mix of emotions, anger, disappointment, and a renewed sense of purpose. This confrontation wasn't just about her, it was about challenging the assumptions and prejudices that people like Benson carried. Marie approached quietly, her expression a mix of concern and admiration. Miss Langston, are you all right? Sophia gave a small, reassuring smile. I'm fine, Marie. Thank you for checking. As the jet continued its journey, Sophia felt a shift in the atmosphere. The turbulence outside had passed, but the storm she had confronted inside was only beginning to unfold. By the time they landed in Geneva, there would be no doubt about who truly commanded this flight, and this life. Confronting the turbulence within. The private jet sailed over the Atlantic Ocean, cruising smoothly at 30,000 feet. Clouds spread out below like an endless quilt, their soft contours glowing under the midday sun. Inside the jet, however, tension still simmered. The turbulence earlier had dissipated, but the atmosphere between Sophia and Captain Todd Benson had not yet settled. Sophia closed her tablet and leaned back in her seat. The last hour had given her plenty of time to reflect, and her thoughts kept circling back to Benson's demeanor. She had spent her career dismantling barriers, those imposed by the industry, by society, and even by her own doubts. But moments like these reminded her that some battles were still ongoing. Her decision was made. This wasn't just about her, it was about every person who had ever been underestimated because of how they looked or who they were. She needed to address the situation not out of anger, but to make a point that could ripple far beyond this flight. Sophia pressed the call button, and Marie appeared almost immediately, her expression attentive. "Yes, Miss Langston? Could you ask Captain Benson to step out of the cockpit for a moment? I'd like to have a word." Marie's eyes flickered with a trace of uncertainty, but she nodded. "Of course. I'll let him know." As Marie disappeared into the cockpit, Sophia took a deep breath. Confrontations weren't her preferred method of handling situations, but sometimes they were necessary. Moments later, the cockpit door opened, and Captain Benson stepped into the cabin. His expression was neutral, but his body language betrayed a hint of defensiveness. "You asked to see me, Miss Langston," he said, his tone carefully controlled. Sophia gestured to the seat across from her. "Yes, Captain. Please, sit." Benson hesitated but complied, lowering himself into the seat with the posture of someone ready for an interrogation. Sophia's calm, steady gaze met his, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the engines filled the silence. "Captain Benson," Sophia began, her tone measured, "I wanted to address something that's been on my mind since we boarded this flight." Benson shifted slightly, his expression guarded. "I see. Is there an issue with the flight or the service?" "No," Sophia replied, her voice firm but not unkind. "The flight itself has been smooth, and Marie has been excellent. What I'm addressing is your conduct." Benson's brows furrowed, and his jaw tightened. "I don't believe I've been anything but professional." "Professionalism isn't just about following protocol," Sophia countered. "It's also about respect for the people you serve and the assumptions you choose to make about them. When I arrived at the terminal, your initial reaction made it clear that you doubted I belonged here. You questioned whether I was on the right flight. You scrutinized me in a way I doubt you would have done to someone who looked different." Benson's lips parted as if to protest, but Sophia raised a hand, stopping him gently but firmly. "Let me finish. Throughout this flight, your demeanor has been polite on the surface but distant and dismissive underneath. I built my career by recognizing these subtle cues. They're not new to me." Benson's face reddened slightly, but he said nothing. Sophia leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. "I want you to understand something, Captain. This isn't just about me. It's about the message your behavior sends. When you doubt someone's place without cause, you reinforce the barriers that people like me have been working to dismantle for decades." The silence between them grew heavy, the hum of the engines the only sound. Finally, Benson cleared his throat. "Miss Langston," he began, his voice quieter now, "I didn't intend to come across as disrespectful. If I did, I apologize." Sophia's expression softened slightly, though her resolve remained. "I appreciate the apology, Captain. But intentions aren't enough. Actions matter. The way we treat people, especially in positions of service or leadership, reflects our values. It's not just about you or me, it's about setting a standard." Benson nodded slowly, his expression contemplative. You're right. I let my assumptions cloud my judgment. That's something I need to work on. Sophia allowed a small, encouraging smile. We all have blind spots, Captain. The important thing is recognizing them and choosing to do better. I hope this conversation helps you do just that. The tension in Benson's shoulders seemed to ease slightly, and he offered a tentative smile in return. Thank you for addressing this directly. It's a conversation I won't forget. Sophia nodded, her tone now lighter. Good. Now, I believe we both have jobs to do, you in the cockpit and me in Geneva. Benson stood, his posture more relaxed than when he had entered. Understood, Miss Langston. I'll make sure the rest of this flight is seamless. As he returned to the cockpit, Sophia exhaled deeply, feeling a weight lift from her chest. The conversation hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. For too long, people had stayed silent in the face of microaggressions, letting them pile up until they became insurmountable barriers. Sophia refused to be part of that silence. Marie reappeared, her expression tentative. Is everything all right, Miss Langston? Sophia smiled warmly. Everything is fine, Marie. Thank you for your help. Marie nodded, her own shoulders relaxing. Let me know if you need anything else. As Sophia returned to her tablet, the jet cruised on, the clouds below parting to reveal the vast blue of the ocean. The confrontation had been a storm of its own, but like the turbulence earlier, it had passed. And now, the skies seemed clearer than ever. A lesson at the landing. As the private jet began its descent into Geneva, the sprawling city came into view. Sunlight danced on the waters of Lake Geneva, and the snow-capped Alps framed the horizon in a breathtaking panorama. Sophia Langston glanced out of the window, her reflection merging with the landscape below. The confrontation with Captain Benson lingered in her mind, but she felt a sense of resolution. She had spoken her truth, and whether or not it had left a lasting impression on Benson, she knew she had done what was necessary. The intercom crackled to life. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We'll be landing in Geneva shortly. Please ensure your seatbelts are securely fastened, and thank you for flying with us today. Sophia noted a slight change in Benson's tone, more measured, perhaps even humbled. It wasn't much, but it was something. She leaned back in her seat, exuding the calm confidence of someone who knew her worth. The unexpected reception. The jet touched down smoothly, gliding across the runway with precision. As it taxied to the private terminal, Sophia gathered her belongings, placing her tablet back into her leather tote. Marie approached with a radiant smile. Miss Langston, welcome to Geneva. I've arranged for your car to be waiting just outside the terminal. Thank you, Marie, Sophia replied warmly. You've been wonderful throughout this flight. Marie beamed, her sincerity evident. It's always a pleasure to assist you. As the jet came to a halt, the cabin door opened, and the staircase was lowered. Sophia stepped out into the crisp Geneva air, the scent of winter mingling with the faint aroma of jet fuel. A sleek black sedan waited on the tarmac, its polished surface gleaming under the afternoon sun. But before she could descend fully, a voice called out behind her. Miss Langston. Sophia turned to see Captain Benson standing at the top of the stairs. His posture was rigid, but his expression had softened, carrying a weight of introspection. I wanted to thank you again, he began, his voice steady but humble. For earlier. You didn't have to address what you did, but you chose to, and it's made me think deeply about myself and how I approach my role. I won't forget this lesson. Sophia held his gaze for a moment, reading the sincerity in his eyes. Then she offered a small, approving nod. Growth starts with reflection, Captain. I hope this marks a positive change for you. It will, Benson said with conviction. Safe travels, Miss Langston. With that, Sophia descended the steps, her heels clicking on the metal as she moved toward the waiting car. She could feel Benson's gaze on her, not out of skepticism now, but out of respect. As she slid into the back seat, she gave him a final glance and a faint smile, watching as he turned back toward the jet with a more purposeful stride. The boardroom and beyond. The drive into Geneva was swift, the city's charm unfolding before her. Cobblestone streets lined with centuries-old buildings met modern skyscrapers in a seamless blend of old and new. Her driver navigated the roads with practiced ease, and soon, the car pulled up to an imposing glass structure in the heart of the business district. Sophia stepped out, her presence immediately commanding attention as she entered the building. The receptionist greeted her with reverence, and within minutes, she was ushered into a conference room where a team of executives awaited her arrival. The presentation that followed was nothing short of masterful. Sophia's commanding knowledge of market trends, her innovative approach to sustainability, and her undeniable charisma captivated the room. Questions were asked and answered with precision, objections dismantled with logic and grace. By the end of the meeting, she had secured not only the partnership but also an invitation to join the board of directors for one of Europe's leading luxury conglomerates. As the executives applauded her vision, Sophia felt a swell of pride, not just for the deal, but for what it symbolized. Every doubter she had encountered, every hurdle she had overcome, had led her to this moment. She was no longer just a disruptor in the luxury industry, she was its future. The full circle. Later that evening, as Sophia prepared to return to her jet for the flight home, she reflected on the day's events. The confrontation with Benson, the triumph in the boardroom, it all tied together into a larger narrative about resilience and determination. She had faced doubt, both overt and covert, yet she had risen above it, as she always had. When she arrived back at the terminal, Captain Benson was there to greet her. His demeanor had shifted entirely. There was no guarded skepticism, no hint of condescension, only a genuine, respectful smile. "Miss Langston," he said as he opened the jet's door for her. "Welcome back. I hope your meeting was a success." "It was," Sophia replied with a knowing smile. "Thank you for asking." As she boarded the jet and settled into her seat, she realized that Benson's transformation, however small, was a victory in itself. It wasn't about winning a battle against one man's assumptions, it was about planting a seed that could grow into something greater. The engines roared to life, and as the jet ascended into the night sky, Sophia looked out at the glittering lights of Geneva below. She knew there were still challenges ahead, still prejudices to confront and barriers to break. But tonight, she flew with a lighter heart, knowing she had left the world just a little better than she had found it. And at 30,000 feet, with the stars as her witness, Sophia Langston soared, not just in her jet, but in the legacy she was building, one bold step at a time.